Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 137, with today's guest, David Jenyns, the author of Authority Content.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. I'm your host today, and my name is Adam Franklin. This is the podcast show for people like you and like me that love marketing on the web. We're going to take you behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments where we look at not only the good and the bad, but also the ugly. We're going to confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. Now, this particular show is brought to you by our book, which is also called Web Marketing That Works, and there is a bonus gift for you for listening, and that is the bundle of 33 free marketing templates. You can get your hands on those over at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Okay, so today's guest is none other than David Jenyns, another Aussie, and I first came across him live at the Digital Marketing Summit last year, but I'd actually been familiar with his work for a little while before that. Now, he's just got a brand new book come out called Authority Content. We're going to discuss that today on the show, and we're also going to reveal how you can get your hands on it for free for the first 5 days after this podcast comes out. So that is from the 11th to the 15th of August 2016. If you're listening to it within this window, it's free on Kindle. If it's after this time, then the price may have stepped up, but go ahead and check it out. So a little bit more about David. His entrepreneurial journey started back in his early 20s when he sold the MCG. So the MCG is Australia's most loved sporting ground, aka the Melbourne Cricket Ground. It was interesting, he got featured on a bunch of news and current affairs shows in Australia at the time, and if you look them up on YouTube, they're really quite interesting. They were rebuilding the stadium, and he took lots of the pieces of dismantled stadium, and he actually went about selling all those pieces as memorabilia. And that was a really interesting idea that he had, and he made some money from that. But look, since then, his business experience spans from developing and franchising retail stores to founding one of Australia's most trusted digital agencies, and that is Melbourne SEO and Video. He's very well regarded, and you'll find his keynote presentations available on YouTube. He's spoken at high-profile events like TEDx and ProBlogger, and of course, I saw him at the Digital Marketing Summit last year. He's a great guy, and with that introduction, let's head over to the show. My name's Adam Franklin, and on the line I have David Jenyns. How are you, Dave?
Fantastic. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Congratulations on the launch of your new book, Authority Content, the simple system for building your brand, sales, and credibility. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mission to get complete. And what's writing books, it's one of those funny things. You see it as important but not urgent. So it always gets you sort of pushed down the priority list. I'm just happy to get it out there and share it with a wider audience.
I guess, yeah, as soon as that deadline's in place and you've got to get it done by a certain point in time, then miraculously everything comes together and you get it out the door. So what's the official launch date? What's the plan for people being able to get their hands on it?
Yeah, so it comes out on the 11th of August on Amazon, so just in the next day or so. And we'll have a launch where it'll last for about 5 days, where we'll be giving the Kindle version away for free. So depending on when people listen to it, that said though, the Kindle version will actually step the price up till it gets to the full recommended retail. So there's some other little bonuses and goodies we'll give away for people who join in the launch. And there'll be the physical copy as well for some people who like to, have a physical book in their hand rather than the digital Kindle version.
Fantastic. Well, I've got the physical book version in my hand. That arrived the other day, and I've been working my way through it. But of course, I've seen your presentations at various conferences over the years and have been very impressed by not only what you've done, but the way that you explain it to people as well. Because I know it can be quite confusing sometimes, people stepping into this content marketing world, and this whole idea of authority content can be quite new to people. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with it yet, what's the notion of authority content?
I also have a copy of the book here as well, and I've got the definition that I use. It's a little bit of a mouthful. I'll read through it and then maybe we can unpack it. But it's authority content is the act of consistently creating and distributing helpful information and stories to gain the attention, engagement, and trust for a clearly defined audience with the objective of identifying those who will benefit from your products and services. Now, I know that's a mouthful, and it probably could have been 2 sentences, but if I unpack it a little bit, it's about creating consistent and helpful information. So you want to make sure that you do it over a regular basis, creating good content and engaging your audience, your prospects and your clients. It's not a one-time affair. You need to do it consistently over a period of time, and you need to be putting out really great quality content that someone actually wants to look at. So it's something that captures their attention and keeps them engaged long enough for you to put your message in front of them more than once. And then if you do that consistently over a period of time, that's when you start to build up a level of trust and you stay front of mind. So when the prospect is looking to buy a product or service, you're pretty much front of mind for them. And it also gets your target market almost to self-select themselves and identify themselves, because they're not going to be listening to your messages and looking at your content that you're putting out on the web unless it's something that's important and relevant to them. So just by the very nature of them listening in and watching is helping to identify them as your prospect. That's really what I see authority content is about.
So are we talking just putting like product brochures and features and benefits of your products and services up online, or does it go deeper than that?
Yeah, look, the way that I like to think about it is content really is the bait that you use to catch a fish, to use that metaphor. So if you're using the wrong bait, you'll catch the wrong fish. So the whole purpose, the first thing that you need to do in any marketing is get very clear on who your target market is. Think about what questions do they have, what problems are they trying to solve, right at the point before they're about to make a purchase for your product or service. So you just need to get into their mind and imagine if they were in research mode or if they've got a particular problem, what are they going to Google and asking of Google to find answers for? And then what you do is you create the content that answers those questions right at the front. And oftentimes a prospect will feel like if you can answer their problems and even articulate their problems better than they can, they just assume that you also have the solution and the answer. So probably more than just product brochures, and you need that type of marketing, that type of content. But when I talk about authority content, it's more helpful than that. It's about answering frequently asked questions. It's about taking someone through almost like a buyer's guide, depending on what your industry is. Like there's always variations based on the industry, but the idea behind it is the same. It's to be helpful and to help them move one step closer to making a buying decision.
Absolutely. No, that's good to clarify. I was being a bit facetious because I know a lot of people default to saying, yes, well, I've got company brochures all about my product and service and how wonderful I am and how long I've been around and all these different, features of a product. And that isn't actually authority marketing at all, I wouldn't say. Like as you say, it's answering people's questions before they know they've got a specific problem that you might be able to help them with. And as you say, reading their mind and answering questions that they've got. So thank you for clarifying that. You spoke a little bit about understanding what people type into Google, which is a simple way of saying search engine optimization, which I know is a big part of your book, but a lot has changed in SEO. And I'd really like to, talk about your approach to SEO or getting found on Google in this day and age.
Yeah, so some of those big changes that we've seen, there's probably a period maybe close to about 24 months ago when we saw Google make the most amount of changes that we've seen to the algorithm in its entire history. It felt like it all happened at once and they rolled out some significant updates. For some people who know a little bit about search engine optimization, they gave them funny names like Penguin and Panda and Hummingbird. And really what it was is Google, for a long time now, has been telling webmasters and businesses what it is that they're looking for on their website. So they're oftentimes articulating and saying, oh, we don't like this type of backlink. Don't be doing this. Don't try and stuff keywords into those pages. Really make it about the user first. And they've been saying a lot of these things for a long time, but it wasn't until they incorporated into the algorithm and then it became part of the way that the machine processed and decided what to display on Google. So where a lot of people, I suppose, got caught out is when some of those updates started to roll out and people had done things to manipulate the search engine rankings, Google would then penalize them. So those changes, the fundamentals of SEO still remain the same, and Google's whole objective has not changed over the years. Their objective is to make sure that they serve the best and most relevant results for the searcher in the least number of clicks. They want someone who's got a problem to go to Google, type in that problem into Google to find the solution and get to it. Either sometimes we're starting to see Google even answer that question now directly in the search results up the top as part of what they call the knowledge graph, but other times they want to get you over to a website that has that answer in the least number of clicks. So if you can help Google achieve that objective, then you're aligning your objectives and their objectives, and then you tend to perform better. So a lot of the loopholes and shortcuts that people were previously taking with search engine optimization are pretty much gone. And if they are there, the window for opportunity to exploit them is a lot less. So you're more often than not better off just making your website helpful, useful, answering people's questions, providing a good user experience, quick loading, looking great on mobile, modern design, all that sort of stuff needs to be baked into your website, and then you'll find that you tend to perform better. Now, there is a bit of a layer of SEO that goes over the top of that. I mean, we still want to be selecting the right keywords and have them on the page, but all of that takes a back seat to the user experience. You always put the user first because they're the ones ultimately that pull out their wallet and make a purchase anyway. So never compromise the user experience just for the sake of SEO. And then if you kind of follow some of Google's best practices around making your website quite solid and having great quality content and then sharing that content around the web, you'll actually find SEO tends to happen a little bit naturally. I know I've kind of simplified it there, but hopefully that answers some of those questions.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to hear, because SEO can be made to sound so confusing and people get so overwhelmed and then put it in the too hard basket, when in fact it isn't really that complicated. As you say, it's putting good quality information on the web. And, I think you said in the book, if you're trying to actually outsmart Google and manipulate or exploit the algorithms, then it's a mug's game, because, there's so many smart geniuses at Google, and they penalize you if you try and cheat the system. You're much better off just focusing on producing the good quality stuff that stands the test of time. And then I guess you can look forward to each algorithm update, because all they're doing is weeding out the bad eggs and putting the better websites and the better content further up those search results, which is really what we're about. Good quality content, and then you get the rewards. So the algorithm changes are nothing to be feared, really.
And website, the way that a business owner should approach the website is just seeing it as the most valuable asset within their business, and they should never want to do anything that compromises that. So you wouldn't try and find any shortcuts, or it's better to play that long game. And then, as you said, different algorithm updates come and go. Sometimes you'll look at a competitor and you'll see them trying a particular tactic. One that we see quite a little bit now is where these doorways pages exist, where sometimes a competitor will have hundreds of different very similar pages on their website that are very well optimized for a specific geographic location. But the content on that page is very, very much the same across the pages. It's almost like they've just done a find and replace to replace the geographic location. Now, Google sees this as doorway pages, thin pages. They call it out in their guidelines. They say it's not a tactic that they endorse. And we know that they've baked some of it into the algorithm to try and weed that out. They'll only get smarter at picking that out as well. And you might look at a competitor and go, wow, they're ranking really well and they're using this particular strategy, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea for you to employ since you're playing the long game. So it really is about having a good, deep understanding of what Google's best practices are. If you feel like you're doing something to manipulate the rankings, more often than not, it's a bad decision, and it's better to just focus on what's going to get the best result. If you wanted to have a strategy where you're going after geographic terms like that, so let's say it's your product or service and then a suburb name, you're better off doing it on your blog, and maybe you create case studies from different past jobs that you've done or clients that you've worked with. That's a great way to create some good, unique content that's relevant to a product or a service that you can link in a geographic term. So that's the better way to go about it. And oftentimes there usually are better ways to do it than the shortcuts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, a lot of people probably a bit scared of doing things wrong in Google's eyes and getting penalized for things that maybe they were trying to do well but maybe made a mistake. I know a lot of people are scared of duplicate content, and oftentimes people might write an article and then people ask them to republish it on another website, but then they're worried that it's going to be picked up as duplicate content and they're going to be punished. Now, is this the case, or is this just simply repurposing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a misnomer when it comes around to duplicate content. Google really hates duplicate content that's on site. So if you had a website and you had loads of pages that were very similar or copied or the same, you'll get penalized for that. But in the web, Google understands that there's going to be duplicate articles and content. Just think of something like a press release. One press release can be taken and published across many, tens of thousands of websites. So Google understands that the syndication of content is just naturally happens as part of the way that the web works. It hates it on site, but when it's shared off site, it's not so much of a big deal. Usually when it comes to ranking, Google will determine what the source is or which is the more authoritative source and tends to rank one of those, and then oftentimes filters out a lot of those duplicate pieces. So depending on how you're creating the content and what you're creating, I wouldn't stress too much about sharing it around. And oftentimes if you're applying something like the actual authority content methodology, where you take a content piece and then you repurpose it. So you might have a video and then get it transcribed, and that transcription could then turn into a different article. You could split out the audio. All of that is coming from the same content piece, but it's not duplicate because it's delivered in different formats. So, yeah, there's ways to get more content out of one piece of work. Does that help to answer that?
That's great, Dave. And I know oftentimes there's the good etiquette to actually have that link back to the original source if you are a webmaster or a blogger and you do decide to syndicate a piece of content. Is that still the best practice, to link back to the original source?
Yeah, for sure. If you're doing it with a URL, then just do it like a normal link. Sometimes if someone asks you to do it with very specific anchor text or keywords that aren't necessarily the brand term, sometimes you're even just better off just doing it as like a no-follow link. I know that's a little bit technical, and that's probably something you mentioned to your webmaster. But this is more so in, I suppose, fringe cases where you're really trying to push the envelope. As a business owner trying to apply this sort of stuff, Google is a little bit more flexible than you might think. Like you don't oftentimes do one bad thing and then Google will never look at your website again or rank it. It's usually if a series of bad mistakes have happened, or quite large mistakes that are quite clearly manipulations of the ranking. So I tend to say for most business owners, don't stress too much. And business owners are quite astute. Oftentimes when you think about things, if it feels like you're just doing it for the sole purpose of ranking in the search engines, then typically speaking, it's probably worth avoiding. Always focus on the user first.
Awesome. Now, in authority content, you lay out a framework which you refer to as the 3 Ps. Would you mind talking us through what the 3 Ps are and how we apply them?
Yeah, so the definition I gave right at the start about what authority content is, the other component to that is, well, how do we actually create that? So I suppose not only is it a noun, but it is also a verb. So how do we actually do it? And that relates to these 3 Ps. We found with business owners most of the time, and Adam would know back in the day from doing client services and things like that, it's sometimes to get content out of a client or a business owner, it's like getting blood from a stone. They're just so busy with the day-to-day operations, they're not going to have time to write a blog article, record a video, maybe do a podcast. Like they just don't have the time. So we developed this process called authority content to batch the content creation into one day. And then in one day, you create enough content that might last for 3 or 6 months. So the 3 Ps: present, product, and promote. The present phase is all about that batching of the content, getting very clear about who the target market is that you're trying to serve and attract. Think about what questions they're asking, and you do all of that thinking up front so that you build in the answers to those questions in this one day of presentation. Now, the way that I talk about presentations, sometimes I talk about them in terms of workshops, but if you say workshops, people imagine these things like, in a classroom with a teacher up the front, that type of thing. But a workshop, really, it's just a live presentation. It could happen in your business. We did some work with the Victorian Cosmetic Institute here in Victoria, where they just did it inside one of their practices. We did it with a swimming pool manufacturer, and we did it inside their business, and they just got some of the sales people together, some of the staff, and they came in, and in one day they recorded around 35 videos all in one go. So it's easy for the business owner to batch that content creation. And if you've got it on one day as well, it's a positive constraint. So it kind of forces you, like Adam said, even right at the start of the interview about deadlines. It's one of those things, if you set a day and you're recording, it causes you to have that content created and ready to go. So that's kind of step 1, the present. And then step 2 is the product phase. Now, depending on the business and what it is that you end up wanting to do with it, if you're a service-based business, sometimes selling a digital product might make sense. If you're a product-type business, sometimes selling a digital product doesn't make sense. A good example of that, we did this authority content process with a swimming pool manufacturer, and it wouldn't make sense for a swimming pool manufacturer to sell a how to build your own swimming pool like ebook or something like that. So we did it slightly different with them. We went through and created a buyer's guide that effectively lives on their website and helps to answer people's questions that they'd be asking just prior to making a purchasing decision for a swimming pool. So things like, should I go for concrete or fiberglass? When should I start thinking about a pool if I'm planning to build a new house? How long does it take to build a swimming pool? How much does a swimming pool cost? All these types of questions we answered all in that one day of presentation. And then we created a resource guide that lives on the website that helps to answer those questions. And it's a combination of video and transcripts. So that's the second phase. It could either be a product that you sell, or it could be just an open resource on your website. And then the final P, which is the promote stage, is you then take that content, chop it up into little pieces, and then repurpose it. So you could get lots of little videos from a lot of the larger videos, and those can then get uploaded to YouTube, transcribed. The transcriptions and the videos can get paired together and become blog posts. You can take that content, the transcriptions, and identify which ones tend to be getting the most engagement. And you could pass that off to a ghostwriter, and he could turn them into high quality articles. You could take some of the audio and split it out and put it on a iTunes channel or SoundCloud, take some of the transcripts and put it into PDFs and share it on PDF sharing sites. There's a multitude of ways that it can be shared at that point. It's really getting quite clear on who that target market is, where they are, and then creating and tailoring that content to the platform that they're spending some time on. And you basically start deploying that content onto that site. And because you've created such a vast amount of content in one go, you can then share it out over a period of time. So it would be, 3 or 6 months, just depends. And that process, your competition, when they look at it and see it from the outside looking in, they just won't get it. It's hard for them to keep up. They're struggling to do the 1 or 2 posts, let alone see something consistently go out. And that's a really great way to position yourself, your business, as the expert and the authority in the space.
And in doing so, you've overcome the biggest barrier to web marketing and building authority content, which is the actual burden or this perceived burden of creating the content. But as you've just explained so brilliantly, you can batch it into a day or an afternoon and then repurpose all that stuff. It's getting it out of the business owner's head or the marketer or the entrepreneur's head, and then having a team of people chop it up into all these little pieces, like you say, and then scheduling them out across platforms. And you've got a whole, several months worth of content from, one afternoon or one day allocated to it. So I think that process you've just spoken about there should hopefully really be reassuring to people that it doesn't need to be this burden where you've got to, get up at 5 every morning and write for 3 hours before breakfast. And, it can just seem so incredibly difficult sometimes. And then when you see people who are producing good content every single day across multiple platforms, you go, well, they must be like, superhuman. But
full team,
yeah, full team. But actually, the way you've laid it out, you don't need to be, but you can still be perceived that way and still be delivering authority content super consistently, and it's all high value stuff. So no, that's a really neat framework there. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, and I think, most business owners, they sometimes when they think about online marketing, they think, oh, well, I'm going to have to engage someone to create that content, whether it's a ghostwriter or they get an actor or someone to appear in videos. And the thing with that is the further the content creation gets from the business owner or even just the team, more often than not, the more it loses the essence and the voice of the business. And you really, to create great quality content, you want to make sure, because that's at the front lines. Typically speaking, that's one of the first pieces of information that your prospects engage in. So you want to make sure that when it does get out there and you capture their attention, that it's good enough that it'll actually engage them. So that's why I think it's, doing it this way means that as you go through the process of the repurposing, it still retains that message. And rightly so, after that one-day presentation, the whole back-end process of what I'm talking about can be systemized and delegated and delivered out. I mention in the book, just waiting for someone to say, you know what I did, Dave? I bought Authority Content, the book, or I got it on Kindle. I hired a marketing graduate student for, 20, 30 grand. And I said, read Authority Content and apply it over the next sort of 6 months. I think that right there would just, depending on the type of business, the ROI that you would get on that, I'm just waiting for that case study to come through, because I think it can be a game changer for a lot of businesses.
I totally agree with you there. And if you're listening to this right now and you want to follow that piece of advice, I would recommend it. So buy Authority Content and get somebody to implement it. Work with them and give them the freedom and the tools that they need to implement it. And the results will be there. And the great thing is you're building authority and you're building an asset. So, every article that you publish or every video or podcast, it's still going to be there on the internet tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. So you're building up this library of content, which can be helping people for many, months and years into the future. And that whole time it's attracting the right types of people into your business. So over an extended period of time, by doing this consistently, you really will just be head and shoulders above your competitors if you follow what's in the book.
Yeah, you touched on a really important thing there. Business, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And doing this over a consistent period of time, and then you start to get momentum. And then each one of these, if you consider them as a little digital asset that continues to pay. So very consciously, you need to make sure you're creating content that is evergreen, that will stand the test of time. The way that I first developed this method was I was in the stock market education space, and we'd created a home study course on how to use a particular charting package. And we're going back, well over 10 years now. And to this day, I still, from my YouTube channel, when I was doing authority content in that space, I still get traffic, I still make sales, and these are for videos that I've made 10 plus, close to 10 years ago now. And the building of digital marketing assets like this is where you really create an unstoppable traffic machine and conversion machine, because by the time someone actually visits your website, they feel like they already know you. I'm sure Adam gets this all the time when he goes and speaks at conferences. People who've listened to the podcast would come up to him and say, I kind of feel like I know you. Adam might have never actually met them before, but they feel like it because they've consumed so much information of Adam's. And then you just kind of, that puts the dynamic of the relationship in a very different place, and you can replicate that in your business as well.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to be going into meetings, especially as a business owner, is when people have actually heard what you forgot to say, read about it, listened to you on a podcast, and they're educated and they're pre-qualified and they already know, like, and trust you to get to that point of a sales consultation or a phone call, that it makes actually closing the business and getting started with that client so much smoother and so much easier because you've actually built the content in the first place. And you build it once and it helps people, different people, over and over again. So yeah, I really love the approach that you're talking about here, Dave.
I might jump in with one case study that would be quite useful here. So and this is the one I know you had heard at that event that I had spoken at, was around Compass Pools, which is one of Australia's leading swimming pool manufacturers, and we implemented the idea of authority content. And one of the early stories that came out from that, about 2 weeks after implementing authority content, one of the lead salespeople, David Payne, went to go visit a prospect, and he was greeted at the door by a wife and the husband, and she basically kissed him on the cheek and said, "It's great to see you again," and invited him to the house. And he thought that was really quite odd because he'd never met them before. And about sort of 20 minutes had gone by, and it was obvious that the lady felt like she knew him. Obviously, right at the start saying, "Great to see you again," but then she'd made references to things that he had said in the past, but he knew that they'd never met. So he thought, look, if I let this go any longer, it's going to be awkward for them when they find out that we haven't actually met. So he politely asked whether or not they'd met. And both the husband and the wife said they were sure that they had met him before. And of course they had. So he didn't push the point, and it wasn't until about 40 minutes later that the husband said, "I know where we know you from. You're the guy from the Compass Pools website. We've watched about 2 hours of your videos before we'd ever actually met you." So imagine how that changes the dynamic. He'd already been positioned as the mini celebrity and the expert. He'd already answered a lot of their questions and their problems in the video. So by the time when they were actually getting together, that whole dynamic was completely changed. And I know video is just one small part of authority content, but it kind of gives you an idea of the power of creating this type of content.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And that sort of stuff happens, doesn't it? It's not just a one-off example of something that, won't happen to you. If you build up the content, that is what actually happens. And then, of course, they, if they feel like they know you and they're kissing you on the cheek on the first meeting, then you got a pretty high likelihood of selling that pool.
Yeah. When I think about the most limited resource we have, every human has, is time, videos really are the best way to duplicate yourself. So if you can capture this content and your sales message and answering those frequently asked questions, it's a great way to effectively multiply your time in the day, and you can reach a much larger audience. So if you're not yet embracing the idea of video, I actually think you're doing a disservice to your business and the way that you're marketing it, and also the amount of people that you can help, because it's a magnifier.
You're dead right there, because video, it's easiest to produce in as much as, like, most people, I think, would find it easier just to talk into their smartphone and post something to Facebook or post something to YouTube. It's so much easier to do like a 5 or 10 minute video answering a question, just like you're talking to a friend, than for most people to sit down and write a 600-word blog post. That can often take hours and hours, even for quite a experienced writer. But a 5-minute to answer a question in 5 minutes on your smartphone, done. And you can hit publish. It can be out there. It can be attracting people in. So even though video has a little bit of it's a little bit scary, I guess, for some people to be putting themselves out there like that. But it's totally the easiest, and totally video is so hot right now. Hey, like on YouTube and Facebook and everything else, it's just a really easy platform.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that's about to open up. The sooner you can get comfortable with it, especially this is seeing the writing on the wall with the 360-degree videos and what we're seeing with virtual reality, which it's on the cusp of exploding. Very soon, this will just be commonplace to have people, popping on VR headsets and consuming and learning different bits of content. YouTube has 360 videos now built into what it is that they do. So it's going to happen incredibly quickly where people then watch that on a VR headset. So there's going to be a huge opportunity for the early adopters to be, imagine being a business where you're showing someone how to solve a particular problem of theirs. And imagine them watching that in a 3D experience, being quite immersive, almost like they're there with you, and you showing them how to do something, or them showing you how to do something that you've got a problem with. That just takes it to the next level. Again, this is one or two moves ahead and can be a little bit scary for some people, but that's where it's headed. And the sooner you can get comfortable with that, the sooner you'll be able to position yourself in front of that wave to take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, mate, where can people get their hands on authority content, and what is the date window for this special launch promotion you've got going on?
Yeah, so if you head over to just authoritycontent.com, we'll link straight through to Amazon from there. Or you can head over to Amazon and just search authority content and grab it from there. We've obviously got that little promotion. We'll be giving the Kindle book version away for 5 days starting on the 11th of August. And then after that, we'll step that price up. And then also there'll be some of the bonuses as well. So all you have to do is send in your Amazon receipt and you'll get access to a whole bunch of courses that are quite useful. I know we've got a mutual friend, Troy Dean, and he did an event called the Recurring Revenue Roadmap. That's one of the bonuses that you'll be able to get when you purchase. And there's a few other goodies if you do get involved and sort of share it around. And for me, the biggest thing is I just want someone to get the book and then apply it and then get the result. And I'd love to hear back. I think what gets me excited is hearing the application of these case studies, because then it kind of reinforces to me that, yep, this is something that can help a lot of business owners.
Fantastic. And do they still get the bonuses if they get the book within the free period?
For sure. Yep, which makes it an even sweeter deal. So,
yes, it does. Yep. And I think I've put forward my Killer Digital Strategies video as well for people who buy the book. So that is normally for sale on our website. I'm throwing that in as a bonus for this promotion. So you can watch that. You can watch Troy D's program, but most importantly, you can read Authority Content by Dave Jenyns. Thank you so much for being on the show. Congratulations on the book, and wish you every success with it.
Great. Thanks again, Adam. All the best.
Pleasure. And that's a wrap for my chat with Dave Jenyns. So make sure you get your hands on his book, Authority Content. Head over to authoritycontent.com and order it. If you're in the launch period, which is the 11th to the 15th of August 2016, then it will be available free on Kindle. There'll be a link right there, or simply just go to Kindle or Amazon, and look it up on Kindle and download it for free. There's a whole bunch of bonuses. As he said, just forward your receipt. Even if you've got it for free, forward your receipt to him. His details are all on that authoritycontent.com page. And you'll actually get access to a whole bunch of bonuses you can't get for free anywhere, including my bonus, which is a recording of my Killer Digital Strategies keynote. There's a whole bunch of other goodies in there too. So do yourself a favor, download it. He is one of the good guys. He explains stuff really well, and follow his example and you will see the results. Yep, highly recommend him. So look, a couple of the takeaways from that podcast is basically that this content creation stuff doesn't need to be a burden. Like if you just batch it and do it in one session, half a day, a full day, and then get people to help you break that out into tweets and podcasts and transcripts and videos and everything else, then look, you'll have 3 or 6 months worth of content set and ready to go. And you can go back about your business if you're, say, the business owner or the technician or what have you in your business. Just spend one afternoon on this marketing stuff, get it all set up, and you'll have awesome stuff being pumped out every day for the next 3 to 6 months. It doesn't need to be complicated. So look, that's the main thing. Do get your hand on his book. And of course, this show was brought to you by mine and Toby's book, Web Marketing That Works. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can buy it on Amazon. And if you want to get the templates for free, just head to Blue Wire Media repurposing.com.au/book. Our intent is to deliver actionable advice. If you've got feedback or questions or anything else for me, please hit me up on email, adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. And finally, if you enjoyed the show, would love it if you left us a review on iTunes. We've got a 5-star review that's just come in, and I'll just share it with you. It's from Anne at Student Bees. She says, I've been listening to this podcast for a few months and always love the interviews they have with guest speakers. The podcast length is great too, not too long. All right, well, thanks so much for that, Anne. And if you enjoyed the show, I would love it if you could take just 60 seconds now to leave us a review on iTunes. It means a lot to me. It makes a big difference to our visibility, and I'll give a shout out to the 5-star reviewers. Until the next show, take care. See ya.